calling all Clojure beginners. The Clouncil is a fun and friendly live call-in show for people starting off on their journey with Clojure to ask experienced Clojurians questions and work out problems together. Why do we do this? Well, we want to help you get unstuck. Are you baffled, befuddled, flustered, flummoxed? Having trouble telling your left parentheses from your right? Your conj from your cons? Well, every other Wednesday, we are here to help you out. Who's here to help you out? The Clouncil core team consists of 5 developers. Myself, Jordan Miller, aka Lambda, as a Chief Lambda Officer. Friend Paula Giron, the Graph Whisperer. Another friend, Mike Fikes, who's known to be a self-hosted compiler. Arne Bressor, head of transducing, and of course, our captain of this ship and inspiration for this project, Daniel Higginbotham. If you follow the QR code on the screen, or you just navigate to theclouncil.com, you too can give us a question to answer and work through. We will also have a myriad of guests and surprise people joining us. Can't wait to see you there. On the path. Welcome to the Clouncil, a college show for noobs, newbies, and novices on the path to being Clojure pros. Give us your problems. We'll consider your code and reveal to us what has you stumped or befuddled, and we will sort it out with elegance. You lost count of your parentheses? Can't conj from your cons? Is threading something reserved for your seamstress? Is a transducer something you would expect your handyman to charge you for? Never fear, dolls. We'll reveal to you the secrets of our wisdom, reducing the ecosystem to exactly the bits that you need to know. I'm your director for this session, Madame Perrin Vissy, and I'm joined today by our board members. Ah, yes, we have Arne Bressor, whose code is so expressive, it won Belgium's Fashion Week. Clouncillor Daniel, who pioneered threading macros as the new hot diet fad. And sadly, due to unexpected circumstances, our dearest Clouncillors, Paula and Mike, are not able to be here today. We all miss them very, very much, but we expect them to be back with us our next session in about 2 weeks. So here. So we will start with our first question. Our first question. Let's see here. Do we have a Mr. Zuff present? Zuff Idris. Zuff, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Oh yes, Zuff gave us an amazing question. Zuff, could you share the question with us, please?
Sure. Yeah. So, for a bit of context, I'm a JavaScript developer with a couple years of experience. And so, yeah, I'm happy to have found Clojure like this early on in my career because I'm not too deeply entrenched in like the object-oriented way of doing things. So that's cool. My question for you, esteemed counselors, though, is that I'm finding that the web development ecosystem isn't quite as transparent as it is in JavaScript. Like if I want to build like a full stack CRUD application, I could easily opt for like the MERN stack or the PERN stack or the mean stack or whatever, you know. Whereas that isn't exactly. I'm slowly discovering what technologies are available to me, but I was wondering if you all were to decide to build like a simple full stack to-do app or like a, you know, any kind of CRUD thing that's simple, which technologies would you pull off the shelf to do that?
Yes, well, thank you for your questions, Zeph. I will answer first, if you don't mind, fellow board members. I will answer as I have spent most of my luxurious career doing front end, and I love that you found it very early in your career. That's so wonderful. Now, I think where you're coming from kind of determines the answer to this question, because trying to just learn things versus trying to get a job in the industry. Are you working in the industry already?
I am, yeah.
Okay, all right, awesome. So a pretty common stack that I've worked at numerous startups in, the stack that kind of got me where I am and maybe a good fit. I'm also primarily a front end focused dev. But serverless as a backend is pretty big right now. And then as far as Clojure script, some flavor of wrapper on React, which you are probably familiar with as a JavaScript developer. I would actually recommend getting familiar with Reagent. The documentation is not as good as the documentation on Reframe, but Reframe is a wrapper on Reagent, which is a wrapper on React. Yeah, I know. I know. But Reframe has really great documentation. A lot of startups kind of have that serverless backend, Reframe on the front end. Like I said, I'm on my third or fourth one that kind of not exactly like that, but that's pretty common. And if you already work in the industry, then I don't need to tell you, but maybe other people listening, it's also really important to know the fundamentals of CSS and SCSS and Bootstrap and maybe even Tailwind if you're feeling fancy. But I answer as a front end focus, kind of primarily Clojure script focused dev, and I will hand it over to our more experienced full stack board members and architecture leads.
Yeah, so if I could complement that, so yeah, we've heard a very front-end focused perspective. You're saying you're a JavaScript developer, but then you're asking for a full CRUD. So I suppose you're also doing JavaScript both on the front and on the back end. Is that right? Are you doing sort of like a Node CRUD backend, or what do you mean exactly by a CRUD?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to clarify, I'm actually really fortunate to work at a company that's using Clojure on the back end. So my experience isn't really with Node as much. I'm familiar with it and the basics of it, but I would be amenable to using Clojure all across the stack.
But so are you more interested right now? Are you or it's do you have more questions about how to approach the backend or how to approach the front end, or
So like Jordan, I am more familiar with the front end, so I suppose it would be more helpful to learn about how to approach the back end from you all.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so that's actually, I think, good to hear, because that means that you're in a good spot in the sense that tooling wise and complexity wise, Clojure actually has many benefits over Clojure script. So Clojure script has this whole compiler, which is then itself built in Clojure, which then cooperates with the Google Clojure compiler. There's a lot going on, which makes tooling complex, and this has gotten a lot better with tools like Shadow CLJS. But simple Clojure and a simple Clojure backend, it actually really doesn't have to be very complicated. I'll post a YouTube video that I made a while ago in the chat on Clojurians. We're actually in, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes set up from scratch a basic backend on Clojure. And the main libraries that I think I use there, if I remember correctly, so I would say sort of from starting from the web server, I would probably use Jetty. Jetty is a Java library which is absolutely rock solid, and there's a Ring Jetty adapter which brings in Jetty. That brings us to Ring, which is sort of like the abstraction for doing web request and response, where you get a Clojure map for your request and you give a Clojure map back, which is your response. So if you know how HTTP works, that should be fairly familiar. Then you probably want to do some kind of, rendering HTML, where I would absolutely say go for some flavor of hiccup. So hiccup is where you write HTML basically using Clojure data structures, which will come back time and time again. Also, when you're doing, reagent reframe on the front end, it's also all hiccup. For hiccup, there's actually multiple options. There's the original hiccup library. I would not recommend using the 1.0 actual hiccup library. There's a hiccup 2, which is still in alpha, but has been for years. It's actually fine. Folks use it all the time. You can use that because it has some safety features built in that hiccup 1 doesn't have. There's also Lambda Island hiccup, which I and my team maintain. The benefit of Lambda Island hiccup is that it has some of the same features that reagent hiccup has, things like fragments or using a function as a component. So then that's actually already familiar, or sort of you can port that across the stack. And with that, you're basically ready to start serving pages. And then there's one more component, I guess, which is your routing. It's like saying like this API endpoint, right? Like has this implementation. For realsies, I would nowadays mostly say use Reitit, which is like REITIT, a project by Metosyn. But it can be a little bit of boilerplate to set it up because it's such a flexible library. What people have used for a very long time, which is very easy to use, is Clojure. It's a bit more heavy on the macros, but it's actually very intuitive. And so Clojure is absolutely fine to start with as well, and might actually be easier. There's more I can say, like you can use Postgres with NextJDBC, with Honey SQL. That's kind of what I would say for like if you want to start talking to a database. Yeah, I think with that you have a very decent and altogether not that complex backend stack.
Oh, thanks, Arne. I see. Is that a Mr. Fikes has appeared? Mr. Fikes, is that you, sir?
Let me see. Yeah, I think that's me.
Oh, yeah. So Mr. Fikes did join us today. Thank you, Master Fikes, for joining us. And so Daniel, so we are answering. I will go over the question that we are answering again. Mr. Zuff asked about what we would recommend for a full stack CRUD application to get familiar with Clojure and ClojureScript. They have a background as a front-end developer and currently work at a company that does Clojure on the back end. They're looking to dive in and have a part of the Clojure fun that we all speak so highly of. I will also mention, I forgot to shamelessly self-promote. I also have some YouTube videos on the matter of ClojureScript. I will post in the Zoom channel. What is ClojureScript? How to start a reagent application? And reagent relevant things. So with that being said, I will throw it over to Daniel, who I'm sure has some more thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I got some thoughts. Also, I wanted to introduce y'all to one of our guest Clouncillor. This is Dozer, the guest Clouncillor. He's gonna help me out here. But yeah, so Zuff, I'm kind of curious about like one of the I remember like early on when I was learning this stuff, like I had just like a really vague and like uncertain sense about like even what is a server, you know? I'm kind of curious about like, is that kind of where you are now, or want to hear a little bit more about like what is it that you're uncertain about, or you want to learn more about precisely?
Sure. Yeah. So I am familiar with what a server is and how it's used. To clarify a bit of my own experience, I'm pretty much on our product, we're using React on the front end and Clojure on the back end, and we're contemplating starting to use Clojure script on the front end as well, which is part of the inspiration for the question. And so, yeah, because it's a startup and the team's so small, I've kind of been thrown into the deep end and kind of been able to ramp up my skills on the front end. And so now I'm kind of, eyeballing the back end just to be a bit more well-rounded. I hope that's better context. I'm not sure if I'm answering exactly.
Oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I guess like basically, I just kind of echo what Clouncillor Arn was just saying too. Like, yeah, just even starting with like starting a little ring, a little Jetty server, in your REPL, and then like moving up from there to like Jetty with like a ring adapter with like a handler, and just seeing like, oh, okay, like you could have the handler just return a string. It's like when you open your browser and like port 8000 or whatever it is, that just like says hello world, and then from there you can build out and say like, all right, like now like it just returns that string every time. Now how do I update this to exhibit different behavior for like different requests, right? The different requests, of course, being like different URLs or like different, also the different HTTP verbs. So that's kind of, I think that's how I'd kind of go about it. And you're right, yeah, that's like, there isn't necessarily like a really, like a kind of canonical, like here's what you do it, and or here's how you do it. But I think, yeah, building it up from there. Part of the reason is that like the tools that are available are pretty straightforward. So like if you take them like one piece at a time, then it's like I don't know, it's I don't know, it's a good way to learn. I think they're just simple. So I don't know, does that help? Cool.
I'm glad that Clouncillor board member Mr. Mike Fikes joined, because he is a part of a project called Apropos that might help you with this mission. Mr. Fikes, would you like to elaborate?
So the mission of moving your app from reagent to Clojure script, is that the subject at hand?
The subject at hand is just
yeah,
learning to build a CRUD application.
Oh
like
yeah,
just getting sinking
You're
your
right.
teeth in.
Yes, we have been building a CRUD application. I haven't heard this term since the 90s, but I know what you mean. Yes, so we've been going through building an application in real time on Apropos. So if you want to see us flail doing that, there's that going on there. Yeah.
What exactly is Apropos? Sorry.
Apropos is another podcast that basically goes over Clojure script, and one of the themes of that one, I think, is that we would tend to go to the REPL often and just like try out stuff at the REPL, and it kind of mimics what you might experience if you were to go to meetups, and you would just sit down at a REPL with other people and just learn stuff by interacting with each other, and having humans talk about code is kind of a great way to learn. That's how I learned a lot of stuff. Was just like, like, how would you solve this? How would you solve that? And just exposing yourself to lots of little things. And of course, Clojure is a great language because you can just sit down in the REPL without a gigantic project and just start messing around. It's kind of amenable to that kind of stuff.
As someone that has previous experience of that might be a very good starting point for you to just see how other people Clojure.
Is it a verb now? Yeah.
Clojure. Yes, it is a verb. It is a noun. It is an adjective.
Yeah. One of the things that it's every part of speech. One of the things that like I think that kind of like, I don't know if this will be helpful for you, but I'm going to share it anyway in case it's not helpful for other beginners who might be watching. Oh, and I can also see Sebastian as his hand raised, so maybe like we can loop Sebastian in again in a second. But it's just like, for me, it was helpful to kind of realize like, oh, okay, like the JVM, like when you run a Clojure app, you're running like a process, right? And this process is like a JVM process. And like within that, like when you are starting a Jetty server, this is like essentially like a thread, which is like listening on on a socket. And like, you know, when it receives messages on this socket, it's like, it just like will do whatever processing, like that's your handler, right? And then it'll send messages back essentially, right? And then so for me, I don't know, just like having that like, oh, this is like the kind of simple model, like within my running JVM process, it's possible to just start something that's going to listen on a thread, like whether it's Jetty or whatever. You could even roll your own HTTP server that's just going to like listen like for messages and then like send messages back. And there's like nothing like special about that, right? And then so like the next step is like, how do you introduce like a complex behavior into that model? It's just like, well, then it's just like, all right, you examine the message, you know, and then like kind of dispatch on it and perform different behaviors based on like the contents of that message, right? And then so like the different behaviors would be like updating a database or whatever. And then eventually, again, you just like send a message back. So anyway, I just wanted to, maybe it's helpful for you, but hopefully it'll be helpful for other folks too, who are kind of like really new to this. But I wonder if we should go ahead and get Sebastian like on the, like under the spotlight here.
Yes, Sebastian, please.
Yes, hello. Just to elaborate on the same question, I think both Daniel and Arne just proposed two very different approaches to the same thing. Arne proposed to pull a handful of libraries from the shelf and start with a full stack. And Daniel proposed to go from the very bottom up with just the ring adapter, put one root just to extract the request map and look into that, how that looks, and to get a better understanding of the very simple inner workings of what makes a request response cycle. And I don't know, what do you think, what the better approach is, to learn it from the very bottom up, to like Daniel proposed, or to pull a full stack like the Luminous framework with 5 to 10 different libraries which already work well together, where you don't have to plug them all together, and so you get to start at a higher level. So what do you think, what is the better approach to learn the stack?
I would actually, before we answer that question, add a third option, which is to find an existing, there's a number of open source Clojure apps, find something that sort of, you know, fits the stack, the direction that you think you might be going into, and just, you know, running it and trying to change it and, you know, kind of poking at it that way, right? So yeah, which of these three options is better? Daniel, what do you think?
Oh, me again. Well, I think it's like, it's probably dependent on the learner, you know, like people have different styles, right? Yeah, and I think it's also, but there can be like kind of external constraints too, right? Like if you're in like a real time crunch, right, and you just like need to get something working, right, then the kind of bottom up approach that I'm talking about like may not be the best given those time constraints, right? Like just like it also, so like sometimes I think about, right, like how you know, back in the day, or even still now, I guess, like artists, like one of the ways that they would learn would be to just like go and sit in front of like some masterpiece and copy it, right, sketch it out and copy it, right. And I think that that's like taking the approach of, you know, use combining, like putting a stack, like a kind of well-known stack together, like or working off of you know, some open source application that's already, you know, that already works. Like it's kind of like that approach in a way. It's like, here's something that's already, you know, it already works, you know, and that can be super valuable, especially like if you are, again, like if you have these time constraints, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, it really does come down to the different learning styles. So Ariel, who's also on the call, I don't know if she wants to join in, but when I started teaching her Clojure, I was trying to go, like bottom up, very slow, step by step, give her small exercises, explain things bit by bit, because that's the kind of learner I have. I need to get to the bottom and then build up my understanding layer by layer. And it was really hard for her to navigate that. And then she just kind of went her own way, found a template for a game, and was like, I'm gonna turn this into, I think it was Pac-Man. And she did, and she learned a ton from it. And after that, she sort of had the frame of reference to go back and dig into some of the stuff a little bit more. So it really depends on what works best for you. And I think going back between these, back and forth between these approaches, like especially if you're more the experiential programmer who sort of needs to see stuff working and wants to see real world code, but then every now and then also taking the time to really take stuff apart and making sure you understand it, to the bottom. Going back and forth between these things will really, I think, advance your learning the most.
So, do you have any thoughts?
Just that you've all given me a lot to think about. I'm very satisfied with your answer. So thanks a lot. And while I have the floor, I just want to extend a very sincere thank you to you all for curating the space for us. It's like very, I don't know, I find it to be invaluable. So thanks a lot.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been great to see you. Like I think every week now, so from the beginning. So glad to help.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. We just wouldn't be a show without all of you and without the awesome questions you're sending us.
Yeah. Oh, I want to mention too. Oh, sorry. Before I'm kind of, oh my God, I'm hogging things. Just to point out, like Pez is also like sharing in the chat some good references. Polylith real world app. I'm sure we'll have these in the show notes too. And yeah, so there's a link to the Polylith real world app. There's a back end portion of that, and then there's like front end as well. We can link to that. And I'll just echo what Sebastian, I think, wrote in the chat. That, or Sebastian, I don't know if you just want to share that with your, instead of me reading your words when you're right here.
Sure, I can. I just found that coming from other ecosystems, that Clojure really lends itself to learn from the very bottom up. In other ecosystems, I don't really think it's an option, perhaps in Python a bit, but every other language and ecosystem I was in, the web frameworks were very high level, very complex, and I really liked that I had the possibility in Clojure to learn from the very bottom up. I'm full-time web developer in another stack, but I never, before I went to Clojure, I never really thought about what is the request map. And when working with the ring adapter and starting from the very bottom up, like Daniel suggested, I really appreciated to learn how simple the data structures are, which are flowing around the client and the server, and how you can manipulate the data, how middlewares work, where you just put stuff in that request map and things like that. I never really thought about it that way because most other frameworks are more high level.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to offer, even in terms of like bottom up versus libraries, that even just generally, like whether or not you take on a dependency, I'm much more willing to just write a little bit of Clojure code to get by with what I'm trying to do. Whereas I think in other languages, I would often take on dependencies. And maybe that's because Clojure is an extremely high level language where you can just accomplish a lot with very little code. Whereas some other languages might feel more verbose or tedious, and you're like, okay, you're ending up writing a lot of code to get something done. So that's just been my experience, is that even taking on dependencies is something I feel like you do less often in Clojure. You feel more comfortable just for the few things you're doing, just writing a little bit of code yourself to do it. But if something's complicated, you don't want to write, if there's some like really complicated thing you're trying to build, that, it's appropriate to use a library if it's doing something for you. Right? Don't just go write it all yourself if it's a complicated thing you're doing.
I mean, you could just write it all yourself, maintain it forever from the beginning of time.
This is true.
All right, it looks like we are about halfway through the hour. We'd like to make it fun with a nice question. We'll start with the Clouncillor's answer, and then we'd like to go around the room and hear from you all. So our halftime question today is I'd like to know, how does programming in Clojure make you feel? With a twist, you must answer using a song title or lyrics. So I will nominate Mr. Arne to go first.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
A song or a lyric or however, an artist even, a genre, answer in music. Mozart.
Sorry,
Okay,
George, can I?
You want to go next?
Can I get a minute for
I'll
this?
answer.
I'm a
Of
little
course,
stumped.
I would have to say between Mozart or Bach, because the elegance and expressiveness is what sings to my soul.
Mhm.
It is classic, will never go out of style. Ah, yes. Classics.
Yeah, so in that case, I would say Clojure makes me feel more like like a Talib Kweli sort of early 2000s East Coast, native tongues, conscious hip hop. Because it's just so expressive, like there's I feel like the code is just flowing, like a good lyric.
Yeah.
So that'll be my take.
Oh, yes. That rap and hip hop they speak of. I've heard of that.
And it's a nice coincidence that Talib really just means student.
Oh, fun fact. I did not know that about that artist. Always learning, always learning. Do we have any other Clouncillors?
To the end.
Any other Clouncillors ready?
I can go. Yeah. So for me, when I think about, when I'm comparing Clojure to other languages, a lot of my other experience has to do with like type systems and Java and stuff like that. And it feels kind of uptight. And Clojure to me feels really relaxed. Like everything's going to be okay. And it feels like kind of like you can just let go and just be more relaxed. So maybe something like Bob Dylan or some of those like relaxing, like hippie-ish kind of music from the 70s and 80s or whatever. That's if it were anything musical, it would be kind of like just very relaxed music, like just kick back on the beach, just don't, or what's that song? Don't worry,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It really does make me feel that way though. Like I really do feel less uptight when I'm programming in Clojure. And I think it's probably due to the lack of type systems and getting all bound up and like, to be honest, like, it's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. I don't care what, pass me a map, I'll deal with it, and sometimes that's bad in certain environments, but for me, it's very relaxing and fluid and just like, yeah, like we'll all be okay. We'll all figure this out.
You get a map and you get a map and you get a map.
There is that man Bob of the Marley family.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And I hear there are these folks that are grateful to be dead.
Yes, that's the same feeling. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Those guys. Yeah.
So what do the participants think? What kind of music does Clojure make you feel like?
Can we get some hands? Aaron has a hand. Hello,
More
Aaron.
Than a Feeling by Boston.
Oh yeah, that's an awesome song. That's one of the best songs ever.
That's good.
And it does.
Sing. Can you sing the song? Can you hum?
Oh no, don't try.
Oh yeah, maybe not everyone is familiar. We're gonna
Okay.
need someone to remind us what it sounds like.
More than a feeling.
That's the main lyric.
I think it's dreaming.
That
That's-
song rocks. Yeah.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Mhm.
Very good.
Rings an Aaron bell, you'd say?
Yeah. All right.
That's a good choice, though. Yeah.
Oh,
Any
yes,
Boston song is a good choice. Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. And we have a Mr. Pez. Pez has raised his hand.
Maybe you're on mute because I don't hear you, but it doesn't look like you.
Hi there.
Ah, yes. Okay.
Yeah, happy. That's a lyric, and
Oh,
that's what Clojure makes me. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
It does. It does make you feel happy. It's true. It's kind
Pharrell.
of silly that a programming language would do that, but it's true.
Clap along if you feel da 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 da. That song, yeah, okay.
I won't sing.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Well,
Okay, we have.
I'm sorry, y'all, but I think there's only one true answer here.
One true answer.
One
Oh
true
no,
answer.
you did do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't.
Oh, but he did. Oh, but he did. Amazing, amazing.
Never gonna give you up, Clojure.
Damn straight.
Yeah, we got Sebastian and
We got
Yeah,
Bobby
feel
and
free to-
Sebastian. I think Bobby was next.
Okay, so along the lines of the kind of feel-good answers that I actually had the great pleasure of being able to do a lightning talk at the Reclosure conference. But the problem is I really had nothing to share, but they were willing to let me do a little musical interlude. So I had no choice but to just take whatever was the first thing that came to my mind and just go with it. And it was the 5 stair steps. Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter. Bum, bum, bum. Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things get brighter. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Someday, yeah, get it together and we'll get it all done. Someday when the world is much brighter.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
then you mentioned classical music, and so I wanted to come up with something a little more heady. So I thought of Alexander Scriabin, and I have his Wikipedia page here. It says that this was back when like Arnold Schoenberg started doing really crazy atonal music.
Okay.
But Scriabin, it says here, was influenced by synesthesia and associated colors with the various harmonic tones. And unlike Schoenberg, which is it almost sounds like just noise to a lot of people. It's like, oh, shut that off, that hurts my ears. Scriabin seemed to make similarly dissonant music, but in a more kind of intuitive way.
Nice.
Synesthesia.
I said that's how Clojure makes you feel.
Yeah, it's crossing the boundaries between the senses in a profound way.
Yeah, I can see that, or feel that, or smell that.
I've felt that before in the past, perhaps. Moving on to Sebastian.
Yeah, because I'm at the very beginning of learning Clojure, I mostly feel like Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk, because I'm reading everything backwards when I'm not using the threading macro, everything from the inside out backwards. But I'm neither singing nor dancing here.
No moonwalking for us? Not today. Next time.
So would you say you are bad?
Just beat it.
Or more like a beat it, or
More like Thriller.
Yeah.
I guess finding a book can be quite a thriller.
The move, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, when you
well,
really get into the code, you're like a smooth criminal.
well, we could keep going all day with these Michael Jackson references, but I think it's time to take it back to the code. Unless we have any more thoughts from the audience. Any more?
Mitesh,
Oh,
I think is raising
Mitesh.
his hand.
Mitesh,
Right.
hello.
So, yep. Hello. So I want to
Have
put in a very
pirate in our midst.
Yeah, this is actually from the anime One Piece. Ahoy! Yeah, so a very odd song is called as Time Traveler by, I think, Hiromitsu Agatsuma. It's a Japanese song completely on the shamisen. And Clojure makes me feel like a time traveler, right? Like before Clojure, everything just feels so primitive, like the things which I used to do. And the things which I'm doing now just feel so advanced. Like it just feels like I'm in the future. So that's how Clojure makes me feel.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing, Mitesh.
Love that. Love that. Well, thank you for sharing, everybody, Clouncillors, people alike. We appreciate the way that you feel, and we want to keep making you feel happy. So we have our next question, and unfortunately, Thomas cannot be here today. Thomas is in relation to me. He is my younger brother, and he does offer timestamp support on our YouTube thing, on our YouTube videos. So he is not able to be here today because he works, but I will ask his question. He says, I've frequently heard that Clojure code can be reusable or modular in some ways. Wonder where he heard that. Do you have any particular idioms or code snippets that you find yourself coming back to? Alternatively, do you have any personal favorite function designs or idioms that you do not find yourself using as much as you would like? Any reason for that? What reason? Why? Code snippets are welcome. So I wonder where you possibly could have heard that. I don't reusable Clojure.
I'd like to start with a thank you and a clap, because Tommy's been very helpful getting these videos produced and out, as has Jordan been and Daniel. But yes, thank you off camera, Tommy. Much appreciated.
Thomas is his profession. Thomas is his professional name. I hear.
Thanks, T-Dog.
Yeah. Does anyone want to take this one first?
I'll go ahead. Because I think this question is very, very open-ended. We can all answer in the way that it feels
different
right
angles
to us.
to come from. Yeah.
So to me, there's a wonderful illustration as you go through your Clojure career of different patterns that you reach for. You're often doing things with data, big data, little data, transforming data. As somebody mentioned, give me a map and I'll do something to it. And I've found a particular pattern to be a threading macro, map, filter, maybe even a reduce, who knows? But a threading macro with transforming functions. And that pattern you can actually do in many languages. I know that pattern also can apply to Python. I've used it in that context as well. And that is a handy dandy little pattern you can keep in your pocket. Now, I find that the next step up from that would be using into. And then the next step, you do the same pattern using into. The next step up from that is, of course, transducers, which we spoke on last week. But many programmers, you can follow their development as they get more elegant and expressive with their code, get more performant. That is a pattern that I find myself reaching for in different contexts. I'll start us there.
Yeah, I'll pick into that and maybe zoom out a tiny bit, because you're talking about, you know, the stuff that's happening inside the functions, and Clojure is a functional language. So the main unit of Clojure, I would say, is the function. And if you write idiomatic, as we call it, Clojure, the way that most of us try to write our Clojure, most of these functions are quote unquote functional, in the sense that you put something into the function, and then based on that, something comes out of the function, and no funny business in the middle. If you put the same thing in, you're going to get the same thing out, and no undue stuff happens. But at some point, you know, you need to do what we call side effects. You need to write or read from a file, and so that's sort of a first step, right? And so the way I would like to think about, like, you know, modular and reusable is like start making functions that are reusable. So, and that really comes down to, don't do too many different sorts of things in the same function. So if you have a function that's like, you know, it's fetching data from somewhere, and then it's doing a bunch of processing of that data, and then it's putting that data somewhere else, well, you know, maybe start by pulling that apart, because that processing part, well, that's your functional part, and, you know, that's not context dependent, and there's a good chance you might need that somewhere else, or you might need a slight variant of that, right? And then you can like combine it with some other function to get a variant of that, and build up a similar pipeline as Jordan was saying. So I think, and as you progress in your Clojure, I think you sort of start to get a feeling of like these different flavors of functions. Oh, this is, you know, this is the kind of function I could put into an update, because it sort of, you know, creates a successor to a map, and it has that pattern where it takes the map first and then maybe some extra arguments. Or this is a function which returns another function which I can put into a map or a filter or something like that. Or so yeah, think about these functions and sort of like don't do too much in a single function. I've seen this you know, where people start writing these like very concrete, you know, like they have like 7 functions, and all of them inside of them have like a map with some inner function. Pull that inner function out, right? Like suddenly that's like so much more reusable, and call the map wherever you're actually mapping. So I hope that makes sense, but that would be my advice. Kind of start to look for, okay, you know, different flavors of functions, starting with separating purely functional and side effectful.
You'll fall into flavor patterns where you find you use, sometimes you might want to use a source and then update this source, or you might want to do merge. You will find different ways to do the same things, because really we're just playing with data. It's a sandbox. You can use a shovel, you can use your hands, you can use a pail. This metaphor is not tracking. I'm going to bail out and hand it to Daniel.
All right, yeah. No, Arne, I really love that response. I didn't, you know, because like this question, I was just like, how do you even answer this? But yeah, it's interesting because, like, you know, I think I never really actually see people talking about modular Clojure code, right? Because it's like, I don't know if y'all do. Do y'all? I don't. And I think it's in part because it's like, it's just not, it's like more from like the OO world, you know? And so like, when we talk about like writing something that can be composed with other things, like Arno was saying about like not having any funny business in your function, that made me think about, you know, as a kid going to the middle school dance, you know, they always tell you to leave room for Jesus, you know, like you don't, like you want to have like between the input and output, you don't want any funny business going on.
I feel like I'm missing some cultural context here, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, you don't. So like when it comes to like funny business, like in Clojure, that's like mostly like what you're talking about here is talking about pure functions, right? where you're not doing any kind of like stateful like mutating side affecting operations, right? So when you're writing pure functions, like those are those are already composable. But yeah, and I think I'll just like echo a little bit about what Arno said, where it's just like I definitely myself also find myself kind of trying to go with the grain of like the most used core functions of update in, map, yeah, I don't know if I can add too much more than that.
Okay.
So, okay, well, we're leaving room for Jesus. It's like when you have, you want to just like, you want to, right? You want to have someone like at arm's length, just to fill you in on the cultural context.
I don't think I've ever heard that phrase, but I knew what you meant for some reason. Room for daylight between.
Yeah.
So the one pattern that I noticed when I was digging in the Clojure script compiler, and if there is any patterns, right? You're like, are there patterns? One is a heavy use of a heavy use of merge, or you're trying to build a large map, and you have various conditional things that could be in there, and I've seen this pattern in the Clojure script compiler where there's like, when this thing is true, then another little map, and it kind of just, you have like several of these, and it can get complicated, like 7 different things. But that kind of like, the fact that when will turn into a nil just kind of like makes sure it's not in there. And you can see that kind of nil punning or whatever, maybe that's not the right word for it, but just the elision of nils. When you're doing like str, you might be trying to build up a string, and in the middle you could just have a little when, some condition, and then some other little string that will just be in there, and if not, it's gone. So
or where you also see this in hiccup.
Yeah.
I want to show this thing only in this condition. Oh, just when, and if it's
when?
false, it'll
Okay.
turn into nil, and
it's gone.
most hiccup implementations will just ignore it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
And I think when I saw that happening in the Clojure script compiler, I'm like, oh, that's actually a pattern, because it's all over the place in there. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but I got used to it. I'm like, I like this. It's like, it's a good way to build up a map conditionally. I think you can also do other tricks with Assoc and whatnot and have things appear conditionally, but yeah.
Yeah, I might use like a const threading macro for something like that, but yeah, the merge and then your whens works just as well.
Oh, I forgot about const thread. Oh yes, I was very heavy into the const thread. Heavy into the const thread for a short period. Oh yes. Oh yes.
The const thread phase.
The const thread phase.
Was this in the same job where you got kicked out for writing a transducer?
No, we shall not mention this again.
Why, yes, it was the same job. No. I was not a good. I had a lot of spunk and energy. Yeah. I was young dev out for blood, out for something. I was definitely out for something. My YouTube career started shortly after. You can see this is now where I put out for parens. Yes, I now put my energy into projects like this instead of torturing my coworkers with horrible design patterns. Not horrible, but
questionable.
Questionable. Misplaced efforts. We'll put it that way. Yeah. On that note, speaking of misplaced efforts, what is the second part of this question was, do you have any favorite that you don't find yourself using as much as you would like? And I have mine. I've been trying to use the interleave function since I implemented it in Scheme years ago. I have never ever found an excuse to like use it in the wild, and I've forced it. I have tried. That's another thing. I've gotten like PRs denied that like you could have just not done, like you could have used like str, like some simple. And yeah, so that's the one. And early that's mine that I've been trying to use that since like 1992. I've been trying to use interleave. And I just never get it, never get to. So that's maybe one of these days.
the interleave function is like, you know, your CrossFit for Clojure. It's like trying to just like bring it up whenever you can. Yeah. No matter what the context. Yeah.
Okay, I have one that I would.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so there's a set of functions that, like, if you're trying to look up something on a map, or you're trying to get something from something, or nth or something like that, a lot of these functions have like a little not found argument that you can supply. And I often forget about that dang thing. And I like write a little bit of conditional code to say like, oh, if it's not there, and then I'm like, the function has a little extra argument. And even like if you literally like you have a map literal and you're like looking up a value from a key, you can give another argument there. And it's like, it's not obvious to me to remember that you can supply that extra argument, and I'll end up writing the code that's conditional. And then I'm like, you can simplify this by just adding that making use of that little not found argument, or whatever you want to call it. So that's a pattern that I forget about. And then I'm like,
I think a similar thing that I sometimes find myself doing is like, you know, you're writing, for instance, like a def method, right? So you're like def method or a def multi, right?
Okay.
Def multi, name of the multi method, you know, fn, you know, you already got your lambda there, your fn, and then like you're just like calling a single argument function in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like using a keyword to look up something in a map, and then it's like, I don't need all of this. I just put the thing there.
The thing, yes. It collapses down to the thing that you wanted. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do that often. I'm like, why did I make the lambda?
It's just sort of like, you know, you're like, your typing is your thinking, right? It's like sort of like, so I got the fn, now what am I gonna do in here? Oh yeah.
It's almost like you wish the editor would just tell you, like, hey, you could get rid of that.
It seems that Mitesh brought up, does CLJ Kondo lint that? Do we know? Does anybody know?
Ask CLJ Kondo users.
I mean, I use it. I wish Michiel was here. He would.
Update. Nope. Just tested.
Well, I think
Thank you,
that
Mitesh.
could be someone's first PR to CLJ Kondo if they want to.
Yeah, they could admonish you, like, you need to get rid of that lambda. You're being silly.
Another update, cry emoji. Just stuff like that.
Yeah.
For folks who aren't on Zoom. Yeah, one of my favorites is like, I like to use reduce, where like the sequence that gets passed in is a sequence of functions. And so I use that sequence of functions to reduce like on some data structure.
Okay.
I always feel like, yeah, I feel so happy. I feel so proud of myself whenever I'm able to like, just like really shoehorn that in there, you know?
Well, you fancier than me. Isn't that just like a transducer though? Really though?
Not really.
No.
don't
Could you turn it into a transducer?
You could do it with a transducer. I'm sure you could.
That would be our spin-off. That would be our spin-off series. Like, can we transduce this? Like, if
can you like, does it blend? But like, does it transduce?
Yeah, does it transduce? Yeah.
I think that should be like the motif of my career.
Yeah. So just burn through one job after another until you.
You know, I don't have a lot of use for them, but when I do, it's just so satisfying. Iterate and reductions. Like iterate, sometimes I find a good use for. I very rarely found a good use for reductions, but like the few times that it's happened, it's like, oh, this is amazing. This is just dopamine all the way.
Oh, I love the dopamine. Speaking of dopamine, looks like we're at the end of the hour. We have to leave time for our picks. What is the thing this week that gave you the dopamine that you needed to continue to live? Well, that got dark.
Yes. What pulled me back from the edge, you're asking?
Yes. What pulled you back from the edge? Yes.
Okay. No, I'll start. Excuse me, Arno.
Okay, you start.
No, you can go ahead.
No, please.
All right. So I've been doing some gardening. Gardening is my pick. Gardening. Actually,
That
you
was
know.
gonna be my pick.
Are you serious?
Yes. You go first.
What are you
Oh, I
gardening?
really did steal that from you. Okay.
Vegetables,
Oh my God.
Read
herbs,
my mind.
Pretty, like,
in bed, out bed, flowers. There's dimensions.
yeah, I've got like this little, I got like a little hydroponic set up in my office of just like a few little pods. I got some like basil and some flowers and stuff. But I got this like vertical garden bed thing. So I ordered it. I did some shopping. I guess that's like the sub pick, shopping. But but for this like vertical garden bed, I'm pretty excited about it. To like have some herbs and stuff like out on my deck.
You have the space. Why would you use vertical? You have, I've seen
Well,
your
on my
yard.
deck, you know.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to walk all the way out to the yard. It's what
Yes, lazy gardening. Yes.
lazy gardening. I see. What
All
about you?
right,
Arne?
well, I'll add to that and give a more concrete tip, which is grow your own ginger. So the thing is, you want to look ideally for organic ginger so that it hasn't been treated, because a lot of the supermarket ginger, it might sprout, but it might not, because it might be treated to not sprout.
Monsanto.
But if you find organic, in the organic aisle or inorganic supermarket, and look for a chunk of ginger that has these little eyes, most of them do. And then, yeah, you just put it like, maybe a centimeter beneath the soil. That's like half an inch-ish. And use lukewarm water to water it, especially if you don't live in particularly warm places. Because it is a tropical plant. It likes to have it warm, and especially in the beginning when it's still sort of, settling. And then, yeah, after a few weeks, you should see start little, or first white and then green shoots popping out. And then by the end of the summer, you dig it out, and you got, or from then on, you basically dig out a piece and break it off whenever you need more ginger. So I just started a new pot and looking forward to having a lot of ginger-based dishes and ginger tea by the end of the summer.
Yeah, that's what I'm drinking. I'm drinking here. I will go off you, Arne. So a pick that I recommend to everybody, now that I've done it, is, I know it sounds silly, but you are what you eat. We are what we eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I, due to some health concerns that I have, I was driven to doing an elimination diet to go, I really just non-inflammatory foods. And I feel so much better. I've found that I have a sensitivity to gluten in nightshade vegetables. And I know it's like, oh, I don't want to be a gluten person, so I don't want to find out. But it turns out I've been bloated for 30 years and I didn't know it. I've just been feeling like crap for a very long time. And now I don't feel like crap. I can look at my life and be like, oh, wow, that wasn't normal. And now, so anybody, I think the marketing term is like anti-inflammation diet, but really it's just, keep to like chicken, fish, and sweet potatoes for 2 weeks, and then slowly add things like dairy and gluten and certain groups of foods back in, and you will feel better because you will know what makes you feel like crap, when most of the time people don't know. You don't even, all of y'all probably don't even know that you're feeling like crap, but you are. If you like, so that is my pick, is if you haven't ever tried elimination diet, try it. You'll feel, and ginger is a big part of that, Arne. Like ginger is a huge thing.
All ginger diet. Got it.
All ginger diet. Yes.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, I am. It's great. Heal. Yay for healing. But Mr. Fikes.
Yeah, mine's a simple one. So we all are all learners, right? So whenever I want to learn something new, my immediate reaction is to go look it up on the internet and find something, either a Wikipedia article or some website that explains it or whatever, or YouTube videos even. I'll watch YouTube endlessly learning things. But one thing I'm getting into recently is books, just old school books from the 90s. And I think it's because people, when you sit down and write a book, You have to think clearly and get it all there. And I just find the a book is slower to get, but these days you can order one off of Amazon pretty quickly. And I'm just getting into that recently. Like, books they used to be good and they still are good.
Yeah.
So give a book a
that all
try.
these editors and these publishers actually add value.
Yes. That's what I'm finding. It's like, man, this whatever the book is, if you're lucky and you get a good one, it's the editorial ship, whatever. Yeah. And the fact that you're paying to have something printed on paper makes it so that they're going to get it right whenever they put it in there, or as close to right as possible. And yeah, man.
I don't know.
So I'm getting old school with books.
These days, I know they just let any old person write a book.
Yeah,
Daniel,
that's
that was
been my
joking.
experience too. Yeah, any person off the street. Yeah.
Who do you think you are?
Maybe I'll try to write a book.
I'm just saying, try to read a book. Don't even
Would you-
write one. Just try to
Would
read
you
a book.
recommend trying to
foreshadowing.
write a book, Daniel?
Oh man, yeah. Would you do that again?
Is that one of my picks? I don't know if that's one of my
No.
picks. Writing
Write a book.
Wait,
That was fun, but
don't tell me.
What's
Gotta do
worse,
it once
writing
in
a
life.
book or writing a markdown parser?
Can you write a markdown person?
Well, on that
awesome.
note, we have reached the conclusion of the Clouncillor session. Going forward, please give us your thoughts, your share on Twitter, share on YouTube, all of the places. This will be put up on YouTube very shortly. But most of all, we'd like to thank you, the Clouncillors. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for making this possible. We really love y'all. This is clearly way too much fun for me personally. So thank you for letting us do this. All right, without
Applause
further
for
ado,
yourselves.
applause.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you. What was
Have a
that?
nice
I don't